Dr. Garcia! What's up? In the flesh.
I think I'm the only person that you know here at DTLT Today and DTLT and your world apparently on Twitter that actually calls you Tim.
Yeah, everybody else calls me Tim.
Because the sock transition.
Although you like how I'm doing, I did black socks for you, but they're tennis shoes.
This is an issue. On the day that he could be wearing white socks with sneakers, he's actually wearing black socks. We still have work to do here, people. We still have work to do. That's awesome.
I'm moving. I'm unpacking.
I love it. You are.
I don't even know where white socks are at the moment.
Well,
which is good.
At least you've got socks on.
Yeah,
that's important.
That's true.
Well, at least he's freaking here for a DTLT today.
I know. And I'll just take this moment to say thank you to Tim for coming in and Jim for escorting me here and allowing me to crash his New Year's party, New Year's Eve life, basically. Busking. We'll get to that at the end. That's the epilogue of the episode.
That's the climax.
That's a climactic epilogue of the episode. Yeah, New Year's Eve plans. I don't think they're salient to the actual DTLT Today episode.
No. But you said you wanted to do a DTLT Today episode, which is kind of funny because DTLT is actually not in session, so to speak. We're much like Congress on holiday at the moment, so it's a little quiet in the office. But I actually wanted to come in today, so I figured, why not? Let's do an episode, and you have some interesting experiences going on with your new position.
Yep.
So it makes for a great episode. So
yep.
Talk a little bit briefly about your position and then how that relates to what we're going to talk about, I guess.
So currently I am working as a live-in educational psychologist with a group of 13 Chinese adolescents. The students live in an apartment. The boys live in one apartment, the gals live in another. I live in an apartment, and I have a male counterpart who lives in an apartment. And the students attend a very exclusive private school, which is literally right across the street.
Okay.
And so my role with them is to work with them on issues of enculturation, emotional development, maturity, and kind of lifespan development over time. I mean, they're all only children. They all come from affluent families. They're all, in country for the first time ever. And so they're dealing with this really high-pressured academic environment, plus being away from their families, plus being in a new country. And so I've been brought on to kind of help them deal with the immediate situation, but also develop a curriculum for the organization that I work for that will hopefully be able to be used to help our students transition into living and schooling in the United States over the time that they're here. So some of the students I work with right now are freshmen and others are juniors. So some of them have the vision, and their families have the vision of being in country
for years
through high school, and then to get into a top tier American university.
Oh, okay. So they're not just here for 1 year or one semester even, or
there's
something.
A chance that, I mean, if I were to stay in this position, there's a chance that I would be, working with kids who are freshmen now and actually see them graduate from high school and then attend university here in the United States as well.
Sure. Awesome.
Yep.
And what I was going to say, from a lot of what I get from your tweeting about it is that it almost feels like you're a surrogate mother to them, because it sounds like a lot of what you do, in addition to the psychological stuff, is just taking them to the pool, taking them out bowling, and just sort of being there for them where their parents can't be in that regard.
Absolutely. And in one of my past careers, I worked in student affairs, and anyone who works in higher education or has worked in residence life, there's a way about being on college campuses. And I think American University started this way with, was it Latin, Jim? In loco parentis? Yeah. It means, the parents in situ with the students while they're living with you, right?
Sure.
So you are the parental representative. And and you know, some schools take this more seriously than others, right? And when you're working with kids this age, I mean, our youngest kids are 14 years old, and so you're definitely there for everything from, you know, issues surrounding puberty and kind of physiological growth and change over time to, I have piano practice and I need to get there at 6, or I'm in my first basketball game, and and you know, I don't have to go to that game.
Yeah.
But I feel a responsibility to go to that game to represent their parents and also support the students' growth in that area. So I do a lot of that as well. The majority of the counseling and advisement that I do with the kids is after school hours or on the weekends when I spend, you know, one-on-one time with them, or in small groups where we have more like rap sessions and just kind of talk about where they are emotionally in a more intimate way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. And you've got some. Was it one article or is it multiple ones that you had read in the Chronicle?
Yeah, it's really interesting because right when I decided to take this job, or when I was actually exploring it, I started to, you know, just of course, as you do, you get tuned up to your environment, and so I started to notice a few pieces about the increase in Chinese students, particularly undergraduates, at least in this piece I'm looking at in the Chronicle from or actually this piece isn't from the Chronicle, this was from the Washington Post in November, and they were talking about the Chinese students enroll in record numbers at U.S. colleges, and there's always been a high quantity of graduate students, Chinese graduate students in U.S. colleges, but right now we're seeing more undergraduates, and actually according to my supervisors and the people who own my organization, there's an increased demand for positions or spots, I guess, in United States high schools, both boarding schools and home placement situations, and also as undergraduates. And so, you know, one of the stats I read was there's been a 60% increase in the amount of undergraduates just in the last year that have applied and come to the United States, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Whereas the graduate enrollment has remained about the same.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I know from my alma mater, Longwood University, they already had a fairly large group of international students, and then the new president came in last year, and that was one of his big focuses was, I want to at least double it, you know. And, I mean, it was just like, wow, you know, that it was going to be, you know, grow huge.
And I'm not dialed in, but I know that the kids that I work with are a younger part of a generation of children that are the first generation spawned from, maybe the first or second generation. I feel like it's the first generation spawned from the ruling that, you know, especially in urban areas in China, families were only allowed to have one child.
Yeah.
And so this generation, pretty much everyone had one kid.
Right.
And apparently high schools there are very competitive, and students have to test to get into the most elite high schools. And so there was a couple of students in my house that they didn't make it through testing into the most elite high schools in the cities that they were in, and so their alternatives were to study abroad.
Yeah.
And so they elected to attend school in the U.S.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is the study abroad thing something that is mostly for privileged kids, or you mentioned that most of yours were, but I didn't know if that was something particular to most study abroad students, especially from China, or if that's just, you know.
I imagine just like in the U.S., I mean, to be able to afford to send your child,
expensive it, right?
To study anywhere is more expensive than having them at home.
Sure. Right?
And then once the tuition of the private schooling comes into place and the room and board comes into place, all of a sudden you're paying upwards of $80,000 a year.
Yeah. Wow.
$80,000 a year to send your child to school. Now, for that money, you get a live-in educational psychologist, you get a live-in cook, you get not a live-in, but a half-time, 20 hours a week plus academic support person, ESL tutoring. You attend a very, you know, elite private school. So all these kids are groomed to go to top-tier American universities, which is the goal. Their goal wasn't to go to a great U.S. high school. Their goal, they're like thinking 2, 3, 4 years in advance. I want my kid to go to Yale. Yeah. Or Smith or Harvard or Berkeley, you know, which is like, when I think about that, I'm like, whoa, you know, that is a massive investment. But if you have the cash, both parents are working because they're living without a child, right? In an economy that's booming. I mean, they can make this choice for their children. So I understand all that, and I think that's what makes me a good fit for this position, is that I understand that they have that and they've made that choice. So every day, every time I interact with a child, I try to put myself in the position of a parent who has this hardcore vision of their child, but is also a parent that loves their child and wants to be with their child and wants to see their child grow through these very important years of adolescence, and wants to see their child perform in their first band concert or their first basketball game, or at their piano recital, or studying, or doing whatever they do, or getting a bank account, all these very simple things. I put myself in that position. So the day-to-day of my work from the outside might not look that interesting, but when you put yourself in a position of, like, a critical position of what a parent is missing out on, it's really intense. Yeah,
what's mundane for you and I is like pivotal for them. It's they want to experience that.
Yep, absolutely.
Especially in the context of you saying that they could be here multiple years. You're not talking a short period of time.
Yeah, it's not like a semester abroad, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And that's a really good segue to the real topic of the show, and we might only have a few minutes left to talk about that, but the real topic of the show for me, and what excited me about having this conversation, hopefully some other people have some resources, is, so I am living in this role with the kids, and so I'm snapping pictures, and I'm writing down stories to myself in my mind, and also through monthly reports to the parents. Yet because the parents are in China, and China's locked down with social media, right? The only way I can share that information with parents is through email as of yet, right? And so I started a WordPress site in order to share pictures and stories and all these different things.
I actually have a picture of it. I'll pull up there so they can see. So that's your group of students.
That's my group of students. Yay! They're so cute. And there's actually one more all the way to the right with the striped shirt. He's not there, but I have 4 boys and 5 gals. No, as I was, 8 boys and 5 gals. That live with us. Yep, that's them. And you're more than welcome to scroll down.
I can't.
Oh, you can.
It's a screenshot.
Yeah, so that's a screenshot. And so this site actually has probably, at least a dozen more pictures on it that I started to upload, and then I stopped, because I'm trying to use an economy of effort. So my goal is to not send 13 different emails every week to parents sharing pictures. My vision would be to have a stream of information that's socially available to the families, to the students themselves, and to other, and this is the other thing, to other practitioners who are working in similar positions than I am, or who might be interested in my take on this work, right?
Sure.
From my background. And I think I would like to create a social environment, an online social space that I could both archive my experience as an educator, but also share the students' experience with their families in China.
Yeah, and it's something that I think we take advantage of here, that it's like, I can start a WordPress blog and we'll start, do it out in the open and let others come in and do it, and then you realize that with the censorship in China that it's a completely different world, and what do I do now? Like, how can I get that information to them? I know I was talking with you a little bit earlier that I get the feeling that a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but a certain generation of Chinese, I guess, teenagers or young adults are keen on how to get past that censorship, but certainly the parents are not going to be in any large mass. So you're going to have to work within the restraints of what exists currently in China.
And I've had some suggestions from different people, and I'm already in communication with the parents in English solely because I don't speak Chinese, or definitely don't write it. And so the more information and situations I present to them in English, I actually don't think that's helpful.
Oh, okay.
I think it would create more distance. So that's why I chose that format of WordPress. It's really picture driven.
Sure.
And it's anecdotal, so that way if we can come up with, some sort of add-on or tool or whatever that would allow them to just translate that minimal text into Chinese, that way they could see everything very clearly. I'm not going to be blogging extensively because that's just not my style.
Yeah.
But I'm all about blurbs and, like sharing information in that way. But I think, to finish up, I think your experience is really salient when you studied abroad in Germany, and I think that would kind of help us wrap it around, because you brought up a theme that I've been thinking about as well in regards to online identity and identity development in
identities
general
that you develop.
during this period of time.
Yeah, and you know, that was a different time frame. I was there in 2000, and you know, that social media just kind of didn't exist. You know, this idea that people have Facebook profiles or whatever
Yep.
it might be in China, whatever they use, and you know, that just didn't exist. But I think of it more in an analog sense that, you know, when I was abroad, I was there for a year. I didn't have the kind of resources that you're providing to the students, where you're in direct connection with the parents. My
Yep.
parents only had connection to me and what I gave them.
Yep.
And I very much chose to have a different type of identity. You almost can't help but have that. You know, you're in a different culture, you're in a different place. And so I think mostly in terms of when I came back, the shock and the realization that I'm sort of a different person
Right.
now, coming back into roles that I hadn't inhabited for a year, and what that meant. And so you talk about these students now creating Facebook profiles in the U.S. that they'll never be able to use when they go back home, or
totally.
without major restrictions, and and probably not even you know, likely, because you know, a social network's only worth something if a ton of people are on there.
Yep.
and in China that's just not going to be the case.
Yep.
So they literally are at this point, in a digital way, creating an identity that will only exist in the space that they're in right now, which is wild.
It is wild to think about that. I can't imagine. And here's the thing, though: we're projecting our adult sensibilities on their very like snapshot-ish adolescence, right? And so I'm projecting the idea that, wow, that would really break me up. Like, I would actually I would rather not participate in digital media if I didn't think I could carry it with me at this point.
And
but when I was 14, I'd probably, you know, like whatever.
Right.
You know, so, and it'll be interesting because, you know, there's a handful of them in China right now. And when they come back, I'm going to ask them, you know, how was it to be without Facebook while you're in China? Because they're all very avid Facebook users now.
So they went home for the holidays.
A handful of them, about half a dozen of them, went home to China during the holidays. And so it'll be interesting to ask them, you know, if that was a big deal. And I can imagine it was for them, because all the people they're connected to on Facebook are either people from China that have hacked Facebook, and they probably don't use it that regularly, or the friends that they've made here, or each other, you know, or, you know, following celebrities or news feeds or whatever they're doing. Yeah,
and this may be a little off topic, but I know I read several months ago an article, and it really is the case that younger generation is not as invested in these social networks as we would assume, to the point where one person's way of curating their identity was, as soon as they posted a photo, they'd leave it for about 24 hours, and then they'd go back and delete it. And they never let, you know, someone would post an update on their Facebook wall, and they go, oh, that's cool, and then delete it, because it was just like, that was their way of, okay, that's great, we had that conversation, and now I'm removing that so that it doesn't exist anymore. They had no you know, no investment in the larger form of building out this identity. It was the communication at the time, and at like you said, snapshot.
Yeah, and I think that's very normal for adolescents. I mean, that's where they're supposed to be developmentally. They're very egocentric. They're very, you know, just in the moment. They're not thinking about their future really beyond goals that have been imposed on them, right? And they're certainly not thinking about their social media footprint.
Which is in some ways at a crossroads with what you're trying to do with the parents.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want, and then my privilege of being in the situation of power to be able to take pictures of them whenever I want and post them, and then make commentary on them. And basically I am creating, or my desire is to create a social footprint for myself and for my work, as with them as the focus of it, right? And so that's something I problematize, you know, and I think, okay, well, how moral is that? How ethical is that? You know, do I need to get all their permission to be a part of this experience? Can I just put pictures up? Is that better? And, you know, I could do that, but I feel like that would be selling the work short.
Right.
Both the work of their development in the face of their parents who are very far away and don't know what's going on, but also selling myself short as an educator, right? And as what I'm contributing and what I'm experiencing in this unique situation that could help colleagues
Yeah.
you know, who might be experiencing something similar. So it's a real conundrum for me, and I definitely haven't found the solution yet.
Well, hopefully this episode will be the start of trying to crack the nut, and you know, maybe people can chime in the comments or in the chat or whatever with suggestions and ideas. I know Leslie mentioned, couldn't you use one of the Chinese social networks that are available? And you
and I
mentioned...
just talked to, so QQ.com, I think it's .com, or it might be .cn or something, .com, is the most prominent social network that Chinese folks use, and actually all the kids have a QQ number, and so do their parents. And it's really interesting because when I first started looking at their email addresses, I was like, is this a number that the government assigns you to participate in online communities?
Interesting.
Because the QQ,
like a social security number.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, or like an ID number or something assigned to them.
Right.
When in fact, the QQ number is just generated randomly. So I went to attempt to get a QQ site, and Julie Forsyth actually suggested QQ as the social network that they use in China. So I said, okay, let me check it out. And so I went to check it out and found that I could get to a page where I could log in English and create a QQ account and get a QQ number, which was generated randomly for me. Mm-hmm. And then I logged in using my QQ number, and then the next page was in Chinese. And there was no English option. So there is no English equivalent to the Chinese social media site. Like, they're not providing, like, why would they? You know what I mean? Like, so there's no, like, Yahoo China, Yahoo America. And if there was, then, or there's no QQ China, QQ America, like there's Yahoo China or Yahoo America.
Sure.
There's no, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So the blockade is really, it's deep and wide.
Yeah. Exactly. They're segregated in there, and it's hard for you to get in there because of the language barrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, I think this is the kind of stuff that, as you said, as this this movement and this trend towards
it has to
larger
change.
thing, it's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just for you, but for the greater cause of the other people in roles like yours.
Absolutely.
So.
And so that is a call to anyone out there who is listening now or will listen to this episode in the future. I think we could be, and the program that I work for is really kind of on the bleeding edge of this sort of work because we do offer this kind of whole student support. Mm-hmm. There are other programs like mine that just put kids in houses with American parents and say, you know, good luck.
Right.
Or have boarding situations where they have, you know, adults living with them, but they don't really provide this whole person support where they have someone in a role like myself. And so I think we're really on the bleeding edge of that kind of interaction and attempting to bridge the social landscape of kids here and their parents back home. And so I believe if we could figure out a way to do that makes sense for us and makes sense for the kids and is safe for them and also is appropriate for the parents, not necessarily even accessible, right? So we get through the access barrier, and then we need to get to the appropriate barrier,
right?
Like culturally appropriate.
Sure.
Like I don't want a picture of my child bowling on the internet. I want pictures of my kids studying and eating dinner. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I took a snapshot of a kid.
The curation of the content before you couldn't even get to it.
I took a snapshot of a kid, and I'm like, look at this picture. It's great. And he's like, don't send that to my parents. I'm like, why? He's like, because I'm playing.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, they want their parents to see that they're serious. Mm-hmm. And so there's this distance between the way we do education here, the way I do education here, at least in this intimate case of this is an important part of your learning is going bowling.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
And being with other kids and being in a social environment and being with me.
Yeah.
And what their
and
parents...
your emotional growth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what their parents imagine their educational experiences here. Right? And so that's a whole other thing. If we can get through the technical barriers, and then we get to the cultural stuff, and then we're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
But the first step is to definitely get through the technology barriers to be able to share something with folks in that country.
Awesome.
That's the call.
Well, thanks, folks, for watching, and definitely chime in the comments on this post. We'll get it up later this evening, and with any ideas that you have, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you all for watching.
Peace.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Thank you.